I can remember getting in the rowing boat for the first time, and I got in it the wrong way round. And he said to me, "Are you winding me up? Are you joking?" And I said, "No, no, I've never been in a rowing boat." And he just looked at me in disgust. He was like, "Oh my God, what is this guy doing?" And he's going to try and row a world first.
So, do bad as welcome to Bad Boy Running. Our next guest, you probably know from the running show. I think he's spoken at two of them at least. But Jordan and I met 4 years ago when I was doing the Somaliland Marathon. He was doing the same one, and since then he's done numerous other challenges. A lot of them under the guise of doing them dangerously, but I think most recently doing them bloody freezingly. And he's also not only just done running, but gone into a few other sports as well, including paddleboarding, rowing from Yemen to Saudi Arabia or something insane like, I don't know, Yemen to Somaliland or something insane like that. But also he's known as one of the hunters on Hunted, and is also has recently removed himself from social media for a very long period, which is always a dangerous thing to do when your whole profile and potentially your whole life earnings and business and charity raising comes from that. So we're going to talk about all those things and the huge amount he's raised for charity. So welcome on the podcast, John Wylie. Yay!
Hey. Thank you, mate. A privilege to be on the Bad Boy Running podcast after listening to so many episodes. What an honour.
Well, it's often the way that people that we know, we just forget to invite on because I guess you're always in my sphere of vision. I always know what you're up to. I always see it, and so I never get that thing that I see and like, oh, who's this person? I need to contact them because I'm like, Jordan. Oh yeah, of course I've got to. So yeah, it's taken way too long. And thank you to the running show for putting on their premiere where we reconnected and like, oh God, we've got to do that. Yeah. But I understand you've just come back from somewhere else very cold.
Yeah, I've just returned from the Antarctica Marathon, and yeah, what an adventure and what a place that was. Especially in the middle of a pandemic as well. You know, trying to get to probably, yeah. I think the most remote place on the planet. It was at the time the only place in the world as well at the time to not have any COVID cases. The only continent until recently. So. It was, as you know, as good as anybody, when you go and do these weird, wonderful, wacky marathons in the craziest of places, it's not just the running, it's the whole, how do you get there? Who do you meet on the way? And what are the stories, in the bars and everything else that goes on these things?
Well, I think especially something like that. I mean, we mentioned Somaliland, and that's got the journey, which is half the story. But something like the Antarctic, I imagine actually a lot of it it's not a marathon run. It's about the kit. It's completely different preparation. And I think until you do it, you don't know that you can necessarily finish it.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be honest, I guess I'm a bit different runner than some people because I'm normally there just for the adventure. I'm never going there to break a record or set a PB. You certainly don't go to these places to set a PB anyway. But as you say, it's so many different challenges. It's about knowing your body, sort of layering up with different systems. How do you cope in the cold? How do you even get to the most remote place in the world in the first place? It took nearly 2 weeks just to get there. 4 or 5 different flights. It was incredible. Was
it really? Wow.
I think because of the COVID as well. So many quarantines in different countries on the way to get there, and I think I had 17 PCR tests on the way before I got to Antarctica. From different countries. It was outrageous.
Wow. Was that part of someone else's race as such, or did you go there?
Yeah, that was part of the official. There's once a year the Antarctica Marathon, so it's actually part of a series that I started as you alluded to earlier. I did the Running Dangerously project, which was running the races in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Somalia or Somaliland. And this was an extension. I came up with Running Dangerously, the Polar Edition, which was to run 10 of the coldest marathons in the world. So that was number 6 of 10. So the next one is obviously the North Pole, another big one coming up next month.
What are the top 10 out of interest? Because I think most people could guess 3 or 4, but top 10.
Yeah, well again, it's open to debate, of course, like all these things are. But for me, at the same time, you try and, I guess, combine it with your own bucket list of cold places that you want to visit.
Yeah.
But, what the first one that I did was the Yukon, which is an incredible marathon and very accessible and affordable in comparison to some of the marathons as well. I think, I'm flying the flag, obviously, for Montaigne here, who sponsor it, but it is one of the most spectacular marathons in the world. What an incredible privilege to run in the Yukon marathon. But the Siberian Ice Race, there's I did one in Alaska. I've done I've got the Greenland one coming up this year. The North Pole, Antarctica. There's the one in Mongolia as well. Across.
So they're nearly all northern hemisphere then, aren't they? I guess, other than
it's only Antarctica, really. Yeah.
I guess that makes sense when you think Australia's bloody warm and it's one of the most far south. Yeah, same with.
We were going to do the first ever. You'll probably remember Andy, who came to Somaliland, was running the.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
He did he was organising and still is organising the Falklands Ultra, the first one, but that was due to take place this year, and I was going to put that in as one of my 10, but obviously with COVID, it got cancelled again, which was a great shame.
So what are you finding then is the biggest challenge of these ice races versus, the three of the dangerous series so far have been near deserts or very hot, Afghanistan, Iraq and Somaliland, but so what have you seen as being the biggest differences?
I think it's the managing it's regulating your body temperature. I think that, when you're in a cold environment, you need to run at a speed where you're not going to sweat excessively. And I'm a big sweater as well. I'm sweating a lot when I'm running. And the danger is in an extremely cold environment is that sweat turns to ice and you freeze, which becomes obviously very dangerous very quickly. But on the other side of that, if you're in a race like the Montaigne Arctic Marathon or the Arctic Ultra in the Yukon, you've also got checkpoints to hit. So you're trying to not run at a pace where you're going to sweat too much, but you're also trying to run at a pace where you're going to still meet the checkpoint. So it's all about knowing your own body and sort of that polar striptease that you have to work out between your own little layering system.
How do you test that then? How do you kind of figure out what that... Because with heart rate, you've got a heart rate monitor. Is there such a thing as like a sweat density layer, or how can you tell?
One of the things... Well, two of the things that I did to try and, you're never going to, without actually being in that environment, you're never going to be able to simulate things like, the wind chill or the environmental factors on the ground. So, but, things like the cryo chambers we have in the UK, ice chambers. I did a marathon in a cryo chamber. We've got the labs down at places like Portsmouth Uni and Loughborough that you can go and test yourself in the cold chambers. Running on sand, although it's not ideal, sand is quite a good representation of soft, sort of unundulating ground, if you like a bit like snow would be. But you don't really know, as you say, until you get out there in the thick of it, and you're learning a lot as you're going along. But that's part of the challenge, isn't it? I guess with these things, it's no different than if you're in the desert. How you're going to do in the heat? So many different varying challenges that you've got to work out, but that's all part of the adventure, I think.
And if someone, do you know whether if someone kept the intensity high enough, would it still be an issue? If your body heat was giving off so much heat that it wouldn't freeze, or was it always going to come into play as when it wicks away like a layer or two, it's too far removed from the body, so it does freeze?
Yeah, well, I think it's a tough one to answer. It's so many variables because obviously everybody's body is different, firstly, but also the clothing that you select to go and run in these races as well as a huge factor. Because some people are very sensible and spend a lot of time researching and testing the kit that they're going to wear. But then, I meet some people who just turn up with their shorts and t-shirt and crack on. So, I think understanding your own body, but also knowing your kit. But I would say with any of these extreme races, firstly, that they're organised often by very competent people who have been doing this a long time. But also, I guess with any race, it should always start with a risk assessment, and I don't mean that in a formal way, but I just mean in, knowing the environment, knowing your body, knowing the kit you're carrying and doing your research as well. Lots of people have been to these places before us. So it's reach out to them, speak to them. What can you learn from the pros and the cons that the running community is a very humble one, and people are always very happy to help, I think, and talk to you.
And are you seeing, because you've done quite a few of these now, are you seeing a similar individual is the typical partaker of cold, distant, long races?
No, I wouldn't say so. I think when you go to these sort of weird, wonderful events, a bit like the ones that that you've experienced as well in places like Afghanistan or wherever, I think you get two types of people, and probably those two types of people is what I think of me and you. One is what I consider you an athlete. You are going there and you're a serious competitor in the race. And you've won races, or you're looking for a strong effort. Whereas I'm going there for the adventure. I'm going there because I want to enjoy it. I want to take in the landscape that's going on around us. I want to speak to the people while I'm running around. And I think there's a 50-50 split in these sort of things. You get the athlete and the adventurer, but both have a common, the commonality is you're in this incredible place, doing something amazing together. And I think you see that from even just the clothes people wear, to the way they warm up, to the way they go about their business on a race day. You can spot the athlete from the adventurer, I think.
So let's take it back then, because how did you first start going down this route of taking on challenges and becoming that adventurer?
To be very honest, I've always been quite adventurous. I was the kid, as a teenager that was camping out, going fishing, climbing trees, and getting up to no good and things. And I didn't do too well at school, and I found myself in the army at 16 years old, and I spent 10 years there, and was very fortunate to travel the world to some dangerous places and some lovely places. And I think for me, how I sort of rediscovered adventure as an adult and as a civilian was after having a bit of a breakdown with my own mental health. To be completely honest, I came out of a long-term relationship with the mother of my daughter after over 10 years, and after the relationship broke down, I really found myself in a bit of a dark hole, and I couldn't drag myself out of it. And a lot of people had talked to me about running and exercise and how that can help you sort of clear your mind, give you clarity of thought, and organize your feelings and things like that. And I'll be very honest, the irony of being on a running podcast, I wouldn't even say that I love running at all, but I really respect the benefits that it has for me, both physically and mentally. I'm not like you, who jumps out of bed thinking I can't wait to go for a run, because I'm quite the opposite. In fact, I have to really motivate myself, and I think because it's often for charitable cause, that really helps with the motivation, because it gives me that purpose, it gives me that mission, that goal to achieve. So I think, one, it's helped me with my mental health, but also when you leave the military as a soldier and you take off your uniform and your medals, you lose that sense of purpose. And doing charitable things it gives you that sense of purpose that I found has been missing since I left the military like 10 years ago. So it's an interesting one. And then obviously as a soldier, for me, I play on the dangerous sort of brand, if you like, that I've tried to build, and doing extreme things. And as I said earlier, though, even though they might sound super dangerous and super extreme, and sometimes they are, but I still always put safety as a main priority. If it's too dangerous, I'm not doing it. And I'm always, doing a risk assessment on everything. And, even in Somaliland, for example, where we first met, the reason I was in Somaliland, because when I was in Somalia in the weeks leading up to that race, I deemed it too dangerous to be, a white Westerner, former soldier in Al-Shabaab territory quite openly. And we did a risk assessment with my team, and we said, what, Somaliland is a much safer place at the time, and let's go there, because it's still of that part of the world, that region. Obviously, as we learned, there's a lot of geopolitics involved with the two countries, but it was deemed too dangerous, so I went to Somaliland instead. But it's about the challenge, it's about the adventure, but it's about the purpose for me as well.
Because what was the first one then? Which race did you take on that you first realised, actually, I'm going to become an adventurer, rather than just enjoying it, but actually this is going to be who I am? Well,
to be honest, it was a few years before I started doing the running dangerously. I got invited to climb Kilimanjaro with some ex-military friends, and it wasn't really something that was on my bucket list necessarily, but they were doing it for a cancer charity at the time. And they said to me, Jordan, do you want to come along? This is what we're doing. And I said, well, why don't we do it a bit differently? And they said, what do you mean? And I said, lots of people have climbed Kilimanjaro. How are we going to stand out and do it a bit differently? So I said, why don't we do it with no shoes on? Let's take our shoes off and climb the mountain completely barefoot. And they thought it was obviously a bit crazy and a bit wacky, and they decided against that idea. But they said, we'll support you and we'll climb with you while we do the trek or whatever. So I took my shoes off at the start, and I give the project a title called Barefoot Warrior. Made a little website and a logo and give it a bit of branding. And my charity expedition raised 70 grand, and their charity expedition raised just over £1,000. And that was the first time I thought, you don't have to necessarily do the most incredible thing, but you've got to do things differently. You've just got to think outside the box. I'm not the fittest, I'm not the fastest, I'm not the best at anything that I do. In fact, far from it. But if you can capture the imagination of the people, your donors, your sponsors, you open up the doors to a whole another world when it comes to, getting sponsorship and fundraising. And that was where I learned with, after that, a few years later, I thought, when I got into a bit of running, I thought, running dangerously. I'm an ex-soldier. I'm going to go back to countries that I'd worked in. We're going to brand it up with a nice logo that's got a bomb or an AK-47 in it or whatever it was at the time. And people really connected with that. I think, because you've got to, I think people love stories, and it was a nice story. We were going back to conflict zones to help children who had been affected by conflict, because ultimately we were raising money to build schools in conflict zones. So it was a real nice narrative that people bought into. And I think you've got to believe in whatever it is you're doing. It can't just be, I'm raising money for this because it's a nice thing to do. I think if you're serious about fundraising, it's got to come from inside. It's got to be in your heart, whether it's, and it can be mental health, it can be homelessness, it can be cancer, it can be children of war like I do. But I think you can't, you've got to be authentic to yourself and to your audience. You've got to mean something to you to really get the buy-in, not only of your donors who are going to donate to the charity, but also to the people who are going to hopefully pay for you to go on these trips and sponsor you. Because, to go to Antarctica or the North Pole, you're looking at around $20,000 to get to these places, plus. It's not cheap, and I certainly couldn't afford that without, the generous support of the sponsors that I work with. So, and then what you need to do if you want to make this into, I guess, a career or a life is, you need to go on these weird and wonderful expeditions that have been kindly funded, but then you need to learn about yourself, about people, about what, about mindset, about resilience, and then you go and take that to the rest of the world and share those lessons for a commercial fee, whether that's as a speaker, as an author, publishing blogs or whatever it might be. And that's what I've tried to do for the last 5-6 years. And touch wood, it's don't get me wrong, I don't make a lot of money, but I do things that I enjoy, and I pay the bills. But that's what I try and do.
And just going back to that Kilimanjaro one, because I didn't actually know that story, so it shows my lack of research. Apologies. I'm surprised that hasn't come up before, actually. But how did you? Were you a barefoot walker, barefoot runner prior to that?
No, not at all. Only in the sort of the month or two leading up to it, but it was not something I done before. It was just me thinking of how can I do things differently. And as I learned very quickly, because a lot of people, straight away you think, oh, it must have been painful, it must have hurt. But as with the cold environments and the cold running, the human body is an incredible sort of tool. It's so adaptable and can adapt so quickly to changing environments. And, of course, it's quite sensitive for the first couple of days, but, you build up quite a thick layer of skin that's been toughened and conditioned. And before you know it, it's just like wearing a bit of leather on the bottom of your foot. Again, it sounds a lot more traumatic than it actually is. But
what's the trail like? Because I've not been, but I assume it's not a beautifully polished trail all the way up, and isn't it snow at the top as well? Yeah,
there's snow at the top, and there are several trails you can take. Obviously, we took the path of least resistance, so to speak, naturally. One thing it did do was slow me down quite a lot. I probably took an extra 4 days longer than I could have done it. Some people flew up there in a couple of days, but we were, sort of closer to 10 days or so. So yes, it slowed me down. Yes, but it was difficult in places, and we had to have probably more rest breaks and things. And the biggest risk I found was for infection. If I got a cut or got a graze, it was that it didn't get infected. So it was constantly, checking your feet were in good condition. But again, as a soldier, these are things that you doing all the time on operations. Doing foot inspections and things. That was quite normal.
I imagine though it would be quite draining mentally because you're actually having to study the ground with every step, and instead of just being able to concentrate on everything else, your whole focus is on what's beneath you.
Yeah, in many respects, although the way we structured the team, I was the sort of at the end of the group, so I was always sort of stepping in footprints, so to speak, and but no different than when you're running in these, you're running across Antarctica or at the North Pole, things like crevasse, and you're looking at your feet all the time, quite often to make sure your footing's okay, so. It was challenging, but it wasn't as tough as perhaps. I probably shouldn't say that when people have sponsored it, but it wasn't as tough as it's perceived to be. But that's also, I think, the art of these challenges. You want the world to think that they're incredibly challenging and tough as well, don't you? And don't get me wrong, at the moment in time of doing it, it is, but it's I think what do we call it? Type 2 fun. It's not that great and enjoyable at the time, but when you look back, it was brilliant. It's one of those things, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think our brain does play tricks with us, and in hindsight, nothing seems as hard as it was. So actually, even when we're saying things aren't tough, doesn't mean we weren't crying at the time and saying, this is too tough.
Yeah.
Why did I do this?
When I was doing the paddleboarding around Great Britain, when I look back at that now, I have such fond memories of paddling in the therapeutic ocean and the blue therapy, but actually I can remember crying into my sleeping bag some nights because it was that tough. But it sort of drifts as a distant memory, the pain, doesn't it, as you move forward?
Because when we first met, you're doing the running dangerously, and then the was it called the paddling dangerous? No, rowing.
Yeah, rowing dangerously. Yeah.
So that was one trip which. I didn't say this to you, but I genuinely was concerned about your safety on that because of how hard it looked and also how unpredictable those waters were. Do you want to explain to the listener exactly what that entailed? Yeah,
so that was it was a world first expedition to try and to cross an area of water called the Bab el Mandab Straits, which translates from Arabic to the Gate of Tears. And it was an area between the Horn of Africa, Djibouti, next door to Somaliland, and Yemen, and back again. And it was an area that I'd spent a lot of time in, and I had a lot of, again, what I guess the audience at the time wouldn't have understood, and because I didn't want them to know, was I had a lot of contacts in that area because I'd worked there in a security capacity. So people like the Coast Guard, the Navy, I not that they were best friends, but I had the ability to contact them, to provide escorts and give me updates on, activity in the area, marine traffic at the time. And so again, it was rowing dangerously. There were lots of risks, but they were all very articulated, managed in great detail. But of course, there's always, with these things, you go in knowingly into the unknown, and the unpredictable can always happen, of course. But and that's why people, I guess, reach out and sponsor and support and things. But it was dangerous for so many reasons. One, because of the commercial. It's one of the busiest shipping routes in the world. It's an area known for piracy, for smuggling, for illegal arms trade. The wildlife. There's a lot of sharks in that area. There's 100 reasons why you wouldn't want to row there. But also for me, that was what was interesting about it. It was. I was shining a spotlight on the conflict in Yemen and the children. 300 children a day were being killed at the time, and you would not find that information anywhere. It'd be 30 pages into Google before you even uncovered a story. And so for me, it's, again, using your expedition or your adventure or your run or whatever it might be to shine a spotlight on an issue and hopefully captivate the world enough to help you. I wouldn't say fix the issue. When none of these things, I'm never going to change the world with my adventures, but what I've learned is you can change the world for one or two kids or for a few people out there, and I think if you can change the world for somebody, well, absolutely you should. We should all give a little bit back. We're very fortunate and very privileged to even just to be sat in the comfort of our homes like we are now. We know from traveling around the world to some of these places that we're very lucky just to be able to sit here having 3 meals a day and a roof over our heads, when some of the people that we've met in places like Afghanistan, Somalia, they would do anything for a life of, for one day in our life. It's incredible, really.
And with that challenge then, what did you find the toughest with it, and how did you prepare?
So I was very fortunate, again, with some amazing sponsors. And, I reached out. One of my sponsors or the brands that I work with is a company called Bremont Watches, based in Henley, a British watch maker. And lovely people and some amazing ambassadors. You may have seen one of their ambassadors, Nims, who did the 14 Peaks recently on the Netflix documentary. So many cool, inspiring people. And they introduced me to one of their other ambassadors, a gentleman called Alex Gregory. I can remember getting in the rowing boat for the first time with Alex in Henley, and I got in it the wrong way round. And he said to me, "Are you winding me up? Are you joking?" And I said, No, I've never been in a rowing boat. And he just looked at me and he was like, "Oh my God, what is this guy doing?" And he's going to try and row a world first. And, we laugh about those moments, but I genuinely didn't know, because you row backwards when you're rowing. You go the wrong way. It's just incredible. So, yeah, as I said, I reach out to people. I built relationships. I ask the experts, because I'm certainly not one. And, you train as hard and as prepare as best as you can. But like always with these adventures that can be quite costly, it's often the biggest challenge is getting to the start line. It's getting, buying a boat, buying all the kit that goes with it, the tracking devices, so much kit and logistics to get a boat that's been built in England all the way to the Horn of Africa without corruption and tax and all the other things that people want to put in the ways. It was a challenge in itself, but again, that's part of the adventure, isn't it? Trying to make all that happen, and the project management, the support team, the film crew, the medical side, and how do you go live from social media when you haven't got a signal or whatever? How do you use satellite comms to make that happen? And I just find all those little bits and pieces so fascinating. And I think also, what I always like to do as well is go back into primary schools and high schools and show them the science, the technology, the engineering, the maths behind an expedition. So it's educational for them. So, because I remember when I sat in a classroom and I didn't do too well at school at all. And, like a lot of kids these days, some people don't learn from sitting looking at textbooks and looking at a teacher talking at the front of a class. So for me, go in and talk about an expedition, it was really interesting for the students and the pupils as well. And I found that, all expeditions are educational if you want them to be, and so many lessons that you can learn and share with young people. And I think that for me, if I'm privileged enough to go to these places like the North Pole or Antarctica, 99.9% of the world will never go to these places because they're so difficult to get to. So I think you almost have a duty of responsibility to go and share whatever you found in these places with the rest of the world. I think it's, you have to do that. You have a responsibility.
And when you're building these challenges out, because you've mentioned a lot of complexity there, whether that's the logistics, the finding the actual money for the backing, the sponsors, you've got the equipment itself, you've then got the fundraising, you've got things like the going live on social media. Like, how would you approach that? Like, which pieces would be first, and what do you think you've done to be successful in ensuring you can bring those all together?
I think first of all, it has to start with, like anything, it starts with an idea. It starts with an idea, and normally, as we know, these ideas often start around a pub table or somewhere silly like that, with a group of friends. And I think you've got to always believe in yourself. It sounds a bit cliche, but you've got to back yourself, because no one else will back you, no one else will support you. And if you're going to go out there and convince the whole world to sponsor you or to donate to you, you've got to believe in it more than anybody. You've got to wake up in the morning and live and breathe that goal, whatever it is. And of course, there'll be detractors, there'll be haters, there'll be people who want to pull you off target along the way. And sometimes you'll wake up thinking, why am I bothering? But you've got to have that fire in your belly. And I think that's where the purpose comes into it, because when you've got a purpose and you know that purpose from a charitable perspective, then it doesn't matter what tries to pull you off track. You'll keep getting back on course. And I think that, if you're coming up with an expedition, have a look at what's been done already and what you can do differently. And again, I'm not saying you have to be the best. You don't have to be a new world record or a world first, but do it differently because, you'll know yourself, people, I have friends and family and they're sending me links every day for, they're doing a 10K run and they want sponsoring and they're doing the whatever, the park run or the London Marathon or whatever it might be. And so many people have jumped out of a plane. So many people have done a 3 Peaks challenge. How do you do something that's completely different in a very crowded charity fundraising marketplace? Well, you have to do things sometimes that are a little bit riskier, are a bit dangerous or a bit more daring. And of course, safety should always be first, but you have to think differently. It's no different than a business. And I think you have to almost treat it like a business. You have to think differently. You have to look at the competition. You have to look at what your objectives are, and you have to come up with a plan. I think a lot of people get it wrong because they don't give their project an identity. I think things like simple things like having a logo and a website for an expedition is really important. It sounds, it's quite a simple concept. Also, when you're looking at fundraising and what you're going to fundraise for, instead of just saying I'm fundraising for this charity, have some tangible outputs. Are you raising to build something? Are you raising to fund something very specific? Because I think when people fundraise these days, and I'm not dissing any charities or anyone's fundraising campaigns, but if you're just raising and it's going into a big pot of money and no one knows where that money's going, that's quite hard for a donor to keep putting money in the pot if you're going back to the same people every time. But if you can say, this is what we're doing, and at the end of it, there's a building or there's a course that's been built or someone's being sponsored to go somewhere. I don't know. There has to be a tangible output for me on one of these things. What else? And
because in terms of you've done well you've been on the BBC talking about some of your challenges. You've got a big social media presence. You do things like the running show. You speak at corporates. Which do you see from those? Which ones of them have the biggest impact on? If I do this, there's going to be that much more in the coffers.
Yeah, I think a lot of people try to go out to as many people as possible, and they, it's like a lot of typically what someone will do is they'll set up a charity fundraising page, and then they will post the link in as many places as possible, and they will ask, please donate, please donate, please donate, and that's very taxing. And also, I think people get charity fatigue where they're constantly sponsoring people and donating, and almost get bored of it. They're like, oh, what's he doing this time? What's he up to now? So for me, I've always focused on the media side because I think build relationships with the media, with the news channels, with the newspapers, with the networks. Because when I say build relationships, I don't just mean, go meet them, shake their hand, give them a business card, and then call them when you want something as it is. Relationships, the toughest thing is to maintain them, because to build a relationship is really easy, but where people get it wrong is they don't maintain relationships. What they do is human nature, what a lot of humans do is they go to somebody just when they want something, which is a terrible trait. Somebody said to me once that the best form of networking is generosity, and I really try to, I believe that, and I live by that. I genuinely try to help as many people with advice and with connections as possible. And I'm not spiritual, I'm not religious or anything like that, but karma seems to come round and help me. I don't go out looking for what can I get from this person or what can I get. I just think, can I help you? If I can help you and you're a good person, I'll do my best to. And then life sort of takes care of itself. And I think a great example was when I was doing the paddling challenge around Great Britain. I was trying to raise 100,000, and I paddled at sea for 5 months, and I raised about £42,000. And the moment I finished paddling, in the week that followed, I more than doubled that, because I was then available to go and do the media coverage, the media interviews and the podcasts and all those things. And that was, for me, an incredible lesson, because I just spent 5 months of posting my link out on Facebook and whatever, Instagram every day. But the moment I was able to sort of activate the media network, everything came to life again. So I think having relationships with the media is important, but don't just use and abuse them. Build proper relationships with these people. These are humans who make these decisions, but also to get the media, I guess, attention. Again, that goes back to what are you doing that's different than that's already been done. because you've got to have something that the media is going to be interested in the first place. And if you're just saying, I'm doing another London Marathon, well, there's another 20, 30,000 people or whatever doing a London Marathon. So, but what makes you any different than them, and what are more deserving? So, you've got to think differently, I think. And you see people, great in the London Marathon. People will do it in costumes or in a theme, and that's what you've got to be like. You've got to think outside the box, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing. You've gone the dangerously route or the extreme route, but it is about entertainment, and people are entertained by seeing people at their limits, but also entertained by laughing. So yeah, I do agree with you that it can be funny or controversial as much as it is difficult. But given your reliance on social media and that publicity, you've come off. How long did you take off social media?
Yeah, I decided to go off for 1 year on the 10th of October, which was World Mental Health Day last year. So maybe I will return on the 10th of October this year. It's remains to be seen. But yeah, you know what? I'll be very honest. I found myself addicted to these platforms where I would lose hours and hours of scrolling every day. I also found there was a lot of negativity on there, as well. People were very quick to a lot of opinions on things that I didn't necessarily agree with, and I found it quite uninspiring in many respects. And I decided
which just out of interest, which platforms were you using, and what kind of content were you taking in?
So, my biggest platforms would be Instagram and Facebook. And I think in Instagram, I've never really had any problems with negativity as such, but I found myself, you know what, again, being very honest, I'll tell you a quick story. I went into a school. I spend a lot of time volunteering in schools and speaking to young people and cadets and things. And over the last 2 years, I've seen a handful of suicides from social media related causes, whether that be bullying or trolling or things like this. And I was in a school in Hampshire just sort of early October, and I just in an assembly before the head teacher came in to sort of settle all the children down. And he said, I was talking to a group of children in the front row just before I started talking, and I was just doing the usual sort of, what do you want to be when you're older? Just asking them a few informal questions. And all these children, and I'm not talking about one or two, all of them wanted to be YouTubers, Instagram models, influencers, celebrities. And I was like, it was blowing my mind. I was just thinking, and I could see there was a teacher next to me, and she was horrified at the answers that they were coming out with. Nobody wanted to be a scientist or an explorer or a policeman or a soldier or a fireman or a nurse or whatever it might, a doctor, surgeon. They all wanted to be things that, for me, I struggle to comprehend that I understand that, adults, these are careers for people now, but I just don't think that they should be the things that children should be compelled to be pursuing as careers. And these are 11, 12-year-old kids. And at the end of the assembly, I just done a talk about, sort of charity adventures and things. And the boy came up to me, one little boy, he must have been 13, 14. And he said to me, he said, sir, he said, I've really been inspired, and I want to be like you when I'm older. And I said, oh, that's a really kind thing to say. Thank you. I said, but why do you feel like that? And he said, because I've just checked you out and you've got over 100,000 followers on Instagram and you've got a blue tick next to your name. And honestly, I went home that night and my mind was just like, and I sort of felt like, because I'm very fortunate to travel, doing my adventures around the world, like everybody on these social platforms, I'm posting the show reel of my life, the best bits. I'm not showing them, while I'm changing the tire or doing the shopping or whatever it might be. I show them the highlights of my life. And I realized that I think I was becoming part of the problem, because I was portraying this perfect life on social media, when actually I was having my own mental health challenges. I take medication for depression, anxiety, and I've done for many years. But I never showed any of that side of me. I just showed this perfect life of going to the Arctic or the polar regions or, whatever it might be. And I thought, I always think you've got to live by your values, what you stand for as a person. And I decided that, I'm going to take a break and a step back from it. And in that year, try and speak to young people about, the realities of social media. And I'm not saying to people, leave social media, but I'm saying know that it's often not the real world. It's often a show reel of our best bits. It's anyone can portray anything they want on social media, and it's often not the reality of the person or their lifestyle they're leading. And I know that from filming on Channel 4 hunting. I'm hunting celebrities all day long, and often what I see online is not necessarily the life that I'm digging around in when I'm in the real world.
And we'll come on to that in a bit, because that's obviously super exciting as well and very topical right now. But and do you think that's the right approach then, rather than posting more real content? Because in some respects you've got this influence now, and by leaving it, you're just leaving it to remain as it is, and maybe a better way to connect with like lots of people is to actually use that power and say, look, I'm having a shit day. I'm utterly useless at all sports and all things today, or was it more of a personal decision because actually you felt yourself you were suffering from being on it?
Yeah, a bit of both. I think definitely I became addicted to social media. It was having a negative effect on me as a father with my daughter. I found myself sitting on the sofa to the point where my daughter was saying, "Daddy, will you come off your phone?" And I felt myself. I guess I felt that I started to seek validation from strangers. I was looking at why have people not commented or liked, and I got this. You almost start developing almost an ego that is not a nice trait. Because it's like the world, the social media world owed me something because I posted. Why are you not? I just felt these toxic traits becoming inside myself that wasn't me, and I needed to escape from it and get a break from it. And also the other side is, I had tried a few times to speak quite openly and honest, and then obviously all of a sudden these trolls come out, and in your attention seeking now, you start talking, you can't win, and that's the social media.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. And that is an issue in that I do think there are some people who use sympathy to try and grow following, or use the importance of mental health in a wrong way for self-purpose. And so it is very easy for trolls to target people who are particularly feeling bad at that time.
It is, it's dangerous as well, because one of the things that I have been doing, and as you say, I do hope to use. When I come back on social media eventually, I'm going to share all the lessons over the last 12 months that I've learned, and the things that I've sort of dealt with and faced. And one of the things that I've been doing over the last few months is I've been working with a production company, and we've been filming, so for my first 2 weeks off social media, I'd wake up still and I was scrolling and realizing, because it was a habit, it was an addiction. And then, my feelings towards it have changed. But I've also been interviewing lots of handful of parents whose children have committed suicide, who have been bullied extensively. And, people have lost lives over comments that have been said on social media. And I just find that so disturbing and tragic that someone can, because you can be bullied. When we were kids, if you got bullied at school, for example, you would leave school and then you'd go home and you were safe. The danger now is children are being bullied in their own bedroom without their parents even knowing. They can be sat at the dinner table being bullied, and that needs more. I don't want to get into the politics of social media, but that needs regulating. People need to be accountable. If you're making somebody go home at night and wanting to end their life because of things you've said, someone's got to be accountable for that somewhere.
And it's public bullying that also is written potentially for forever. So, everyone sees it and it will remain, which is...
And people, even, I don't like the word celebrities and things, but people who, we've seen lots of cases where people have been character assassinated by the media, and the Caroline Flack scenario a couple of years ago, someone who tragically lost her life because of ultimately the way she was treated by rumours and the media and things like that. It's absolute tragic. And, even again, you look at the media now, Prince Andrew, for whatever you think of him, rightly or wrongly, and I'm not having an opinion on it, but he's someone who has not been proven guilty, but he's been completely character assassinated. He's lost all his titles, and again, I'm absolutely not defending him, but we don't know the reality of what's gone on there. But his life's over as a member of the royal family, essentially, isn't it?
I mean, I don't think there's anything you can say with Prince Andrew in mind without sounding like you're.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's what I mean. It's a dangerous, especially when we're talking to the public in a podcast. You got to be careful. You got to be careful everything you say these days, haven't you? Because you don't know what narrative is going to be spun on it.
Yeah. I mean, and what have your sponsors said about this? Because a large reason why they're sponsoring you is your ability to get their products in front of people, which is primarily through social media. Is only through social media when you're not actively doing your challenges, really.
Yeah, well, it is and it isn't. So, really good point actually to highlight, and that was initially one of my main concerns as well. And I'll give you two examples actually. So, Montaigne, for example, who have sponsored me and supported me for the last 4 or 5 years, they straight away said, Jordan, we get it, we understand your reasons for doing it, and we're going to support you. And we think it's brilliant because we're an outdoor company. We embrace the spirit of adventure, and we know how important being, that the green or the blue therapy, the mountains or the ocean is so important for mental health. So we are completely aligned. And for me, that's about working with companies that share the same values as you. So when I'm going to sponsors, I'm not going to someone who's just going to pay for it. I want someone who's going to come on the journey and they believe in what I'm doing and they understand what I'm doing and they're supporting it. Whereas another outdoor brand that I've worked with in a social media capacity, they said to me, Jordan, until you come back on social media, you're no use to us. And the exact phrase what they used, which was really interesting, was my social currency has devalued significantly while I'm not on social media. And I just thought,
that's a wanky phrase, isn't it? I mean,
that's your social currency. So I challenged it, because I thought it's because of the research that I've been doing and what I'm doing with schools. I challenged it and I said, so what you're saying essentially is you don't care about me or my mental health or me as a person or my values. All you care about is how many impressions that post or engagements that post got that I posted. And and they said, no, we're not saying that, blah blah blah. But ultimately, they ended their paid partnership affiliation with me for that. And I get that as well, though I see that it's business. I'm no use to them while I'm not on social media. But for me, working with companies like Bremont Watches, Montaigne, Eaton Harris, my main sponsor, they're the companies that I know I picked the right companies in the first place because they've all completely supported, my messaging and also, I'm in schools every day. I'm wearing their kit still. I'm on the news doing, Sky News, BBC now and again. So I'm the Army Cadets National Ambassador. So every cadet camp that I go to, I'm wearing, their brand and things. But so it's about aligning yourself to companies with the same values, I think, not just going with who's going to pay for your trip.
And is there a reason why you're protecting the brand by not mentioning who they were?
Yeah, it's a good question. Probably for legal reasons. I don't know. I'll have to consult my lawyer before I start publishing their name all over the place.
Yeah, and it is. It's hard because I see this with a brand I'm working closely with, where they're looking at sponsorships of athletes and doing the right thing. I think we're almost trapped as individuals where we truly believe in brands and love brands in the same way like we love people, and they're not. They are businesses, and we want our businesses to be moral, but there is an inherent conflict in that. And it's a tough one because the brands I'm sure would ideally have an unlimited bucket of sponsorship dollar and therefore not have to ask anyone to have to deliver on their marketing targets, but then that person's got someone above them who's saying, why are we giving money to someone who's not?
No, absolutely. And I think that's where, the things like TV show and things have been really helpful. I think one thing you have to do if you're, whoever you are in life, is you have to play to your strengths, and everyone's got different strengths. Everyone's got different networks. And, I really don't, I genuinely, sincerely don't buy into celebrity culture. But one of the things that working on a TV show does is it gives you the profile to things like attract more sponsors, attract media interest when you need it. So you have to play to your strengths, so of course, when I'm pitching to a company, I'm absolutely telling them that I'm part of a BAFTA award-winning show or whatever, and you use that. My role in that is very small, but I use whatever strengths or things that I've got to commercialize the opportunity.
Because how did that come about? Because I knew you, but I didn't realize you were Unhunted until maybe a year and a half after we'd known each other.
Yeah, I've been doing sort of 4 or 5 series, and then it was basically, I guess, a bit of chance. I was in the military. I did a bit of work in intelligence in the military, and I got a phone call off a friend of a friend who said they're recruiting for new hunters. Do you fancy getting involved? And I went for the audition and the screen test, and they said, yeah, come and join us. And the rest was history. And it's been great fun because, again, from a charity perspective, you get to do a lot of talks and things because it is, although it's a TV show, it isn't. I like to think it's not your typical reality TV show because actually the people who I'm working with are, I'm there for the adventure, but most of the people on the show, they are the best in the country at what they do. They're intelligence experts, they're interrogators, they're cyber crime, they're former detectives. So it's not just people who've popped up overnight to work on TV. These are people who have been doing 20, 30 years experience, who are really good at what they do. So it's not only a great adventure, but I'm constantly learning from these people. And, it's amazing because everything we do is being monitored and tracked. And it's a great format, the TV show, because they've just turned it into a show. But whether it's social media, whether it's our bank accounts, our phone records, everything we do, somebody's always watching. And I just find it such a fascinating concept.
And so from the moment they step out of the van, or I mean, the format does change slightly each one. Like, what does your week look like? How many hours are you on, and where are you sleeping, and how is it determined where you are, and like how are you prioritized?
Obviously, I can't give all the trade secrets away, but we're working almost 24 hours a day. We're breaking for 6 to 8 hours, for sleep. But other than that, we are on the move, investigating all day, every day. A lot of people say, "Oh, it's fixed or it's set up." I can absolutely promise you, hand on heart, that it's never fixed or set up. We are searching, we are hunting, we are analysing, we are interrogating every bit of information that we get. I never know where I'm sleeping until 10 minutes before I'm checking into the nearest, B&B or wherever it is. And same for fugitives. They're bedding down in fields, in spare bedrooms, in barns, on farms. Wherever they end up to sleep, they sleep. That's not a setup for any camera reasons or anything else. It's very real in that respect. The only things that we simulate, which it says on the show anyway, is things like ANPR, number plate recognition and CCTV and things. But if they can survive, 25 days or whatever it is on the run, they win the money. That's as simple as it is. And it's all regulated by Ofcom, the TV regulator. So you can't cheat. You're not allowed to cheat. It's a cash prize, and there's been a lot of controversy over the years with telephones and cash prizes and things. And it doesn't happen. You can't fix the show. It'd be illegal.
And are you given a region that because there's quite a few of you hunters who are used at different times. Like, are you split across the country, or are you focused on a certain number of individuals that you then specialise in and try and follow, or how's that assigned?
Again, it depends on who's on duty on the day. You have like deputies, and you have a chief, you have an ops director. Every day is a different day, but often, because you could be sitting in one part of the country for a long time with nothing going on, so you obviously retask to where the activity or the action is. And if you're going through a quiet period, you're trying to generate your own leads as a real life detective would. So you'll go and speak to associates of the family or friends or former work colleagues, or start looking into their social media profiles, who they're friends with, what pictures have they posted. It's a lot of it is open source intelligence gathering, trying to find that little needle in the haystack that's going to be that gold ticket, to find where they are. And then
how good would you say people are compared to how good people think they are?
Do people, one thing I would say, which you can't really see from being on TV, is that, and you speak to any of the fugitives, is it's normally one of the most stressful experiences that they've ever encountered, because for them as a fugitive, they cannot trust anybody. You know, a car stops at the side of the road when they're hitchhiking. They don't know if they're being set up. They don't know if a hunter's in that car undercover. They go into a shop that they know that there's a CCTV. They go everywhere they go. They don't trust anybody, and the stress on them. And you know, you see in the real world after somebody's been on the run for 5 years and they walk into a police station and
they hand themselves in, don't they?
Yeah, because it is very, very incredibly stressful. And that's one thing that they always say. And, you know, if somebody's used to speaking to their mother or their daughter, you know, a couple of times a day, and all of a sudden they haven't spoken to them for 3 weeks, that's a pretty intensive. And I know it's easy to say, well, they're getting $100,000, but, you know, humans are emotional people, and and they're always looking for a shortcut or an advantage. And it's not what I would say is it's not easy to go missing in modern times. You know, it's very. I'm always surprised when I see news that so and so has gone missing for 2 weeks, because, you know, normally it's a lack of resources, because if you want to find someone in this country, you can bloody find them.
And how? I mean, you've done it for several seasons now. You must have gone over in your head what your strategy would be.
Do you know what the best strategy would be? And I always say this, is not to have a strategy, because if you've got a strategy or a plan, you know, you could be predicted. You know, these analysts are that good. They're ex-MI5, MI6 intelligence specialists. They know what you're going to do before you know what you're going to do. You know, they're looking for patterns in your decision making at every stage. So I think the people who do the best on the show are the ones who don't even know what they're going to do from day to day.
And do you find that, have there been any candidates that have not made it to air, or kind of standout candidates that you think are worth mentioning, or people who've been incredibly good at actually creating a web of deceit that you've fallen for while they've been doing something completely different?
Yeah, I think one that stands out just off the top of my head was a couple of series ago. We were... Two of the fugitives were a fugitive network was communicating via, I think it was like Modern Warfare, through the headsets. They were logging on. They were logging on at like different times every night, and they were communicating in code through a computer game and talking. And it took us quite a while. It took the analysts quite a while to click that that's how they were all communicating through one of these Xbox type games. And I just thought that was genius, you know, for this gamer network to come to life and help them. I think the people who've always, you know, we've had a few ex-military, ex-police in there, but sometimes they plan too much. You know, we've had they're so precise in their decision making that they put too much effort into planning. I think a couple of series ago on the celebrity edition, the two celebrity chefs won the show. It was John Christophe Novelli and Aldo Zilli, and I really underestimated them as. You know, and as hunters, we underestimated them. We thought, you know, what do a couple of guys who work in a kitchen, what are they going to be able to outrun, you know, some of the best detectives in the country? And they did. And you know, what I learned about chefs is they are so meticulous. They are so highly motivated. They're so competitive, and they work so hard. And it was something that I'd never had anything to do with a chef in my life. You know, I can only just cook my own dinner. And these people were really good, and we definitely underestimated them. And I have a huge respect for anyone who works in a kitchen as a chef. And it's brilliant how talented they are.
And who would you most want to go on the show?
You know, I think when you reflect, you always want, because not on the celebrity series, but on the real series, on the main series. You know, that obviously some of these people that they've got incredible backstories, as is often the case on any reality show. You know, they've been cast and picked for a reason, and it is quite hard sometimes, because you have to take the emotion out of your decision making, because you know, some people have had a real rough ride in life, you know, and really been through the mill, and whether they've survived, you know, diseases or they've lost family members. Sometimes it is tough when the show's finished and you're driving home and you've just denied someone of $100,000, and you think, bloody hell. I can remember there was one particular a couple of series ago, and we caught one of the guys really near the end of the show when it was on extraction day, and I was driving home, and I felt quite emotional myself, but you know, because I thought we just stopped him winning 100,000, and this guy, I'd lived in his life for 4 weeks, and I know what he's been through, and I just thought, But that's our job. It's a show. It's a game. We're trying to win as much as they're trying to win, and that's what we do, unfortunately.
And do you think most people think they'd be quite good at it, or would most people? Do you think most people think that they struggle?
No, I think everybody sits at home watching the TV going, bloody hell, I'd do better than him, or why is he doing that? I wouldn't do that.
And do you think they will ever have an episode where they reverse it? They bring in external specialists and they send the hunters out.
I don't know, probably not, but it'd be a great concept to go on the run and try and use all the sort of the insider tricks to evade capture. But it's a very difficult thing, and anyone who survives the full time on the run, they've done bloody well and they've played a good game. However they've done it, it's pretty impressive.
And in terms of your future, then, you're doing the 10 cold. Are things done on the fly? Well, not on the fly, but are things done? You finish before you start consideration, or have you already got a set of potential targets in your future?
Yeah, I've got a plan of different projects and expeditions, but I'm very keen to, as you say, get this one completely finished before I start, because I've got responsibilities to sponsors and to charities and things, so I don't want to start thinking about what's next before I've completed this. But of course I've got a short list of things that I would like to do, but again I need to. Already, I've got people making logos and things for potential things, but I haven't gone out to sponsors or supporters yet and said, what do you think to this? Because I've got a few ideas brewing behind the scenes, but I want to try and, let's say, move away from the charity aspect. I want to focus more on the educational aspect and how do I help children learn more from these expeditions as opposed to raising, money for a specific cause. I would love to get involved more with what lessons are we learning? Like going to somewhere like the North Pole, what do we understand about climate change or polar wildlife? Or I would love to show children that, when I'm doing these runs, can we take some ice samples or wind direction speeds or measure sea levels or whatever it might be? I want to make them more educationally focused, the expeditions, than sort of charity focused as such.
And that's actually, that sadly is probably something you could probably find some kind of challenge to be the first person to cross something in a way that wasn't achievable previously because of climate change. So
absolutely. And also, doing carbon neutral challenges and things like that. How do you do a challenge that has the least impact on on the environment or whatever it is? And again, though, they're ideas that you can be more creative with. As you say, there will be parts of the world now that have sadly melted or are no longer there, which means a route has been opened. And how can you use that opportunity to use it for climate change awareness or environmental do something positive and good with whatever you're going to do, and use it for a force of good or awareness in the world. I think we have to do that.
And I've just remembered when you were doing the paddleboarding one, I was with one of my friends whose girlfriend held the record for I can't remember if it was the whole round the UK or the longest one. And he's convinced that you took it on because you looked at it and you thought, this will be quite an easy challenge to do. And then like a third of the way through, you suddenly went, oh, crap, this is really tough. Is that the case?
I wouldn't say, I definitely never thought it was an easy challenge to take on, but I certainly underestimated how long and how hard it was going to be, definitely. I think also because I'd never paddleboarded on the ocean when I took it on. So I learned, the first 2 weeks I spent more time in the water than I was on the paddleboard, trying to find my way and my balance. But it was an incredibly tough challenge. And actually, I set a record for the longest ocean paddleboard journey, and it was subsequently broken a year later by a really cool guy, Brendan Prince, who's a legend of a paddleboarder. And I absolute salute him. He smashed the record, and he completed the challenge, and so much respect for him because he shared lots of lessons, and we shared kit equipment and things. But for me, again, it wasn't about, people often focus on you didn't get to the end of the paddle, you got stopped short. But for me, we raised £100,000 and we built a school, and that's what the mission was about. Anything else that came, records first, bonus, but I think it's about your purpose. And whenever you do an expedition, you always got to remember why you started. Not necessarily what you're doing, but why you're doing it. I think that's a really important message for anybody.
Now, if people want to follow your journey, what's the best way for them to do that, given your current situation with social media?
Yeah, I think, the website, every time we feature in sort of the news articles and things, my website is updated. But yeah, I'm keeping I guess, not a low profile as such, but I'm living in the real world and as opposed to the digital one for the next 6 months, certainly. And, maybe even longer. I don't know, because I'm sort of enjoying the freedom at the moment. But I guess if the sponsors start dropping off and things, I'll have to readdress it. But, I'll still be at all, at different events, the Kendall Mountain Festival, the running shows, things like that. I'll always be at these sort of events, in the community. But one of the other things it's made me do actually is speak to people more, people who I do care about or they care about me. I've been having a lot more, let's go for lunch and a coffee, let's speak on the phone, let's have a FaceTime, as opposed to, I think, we just chat via emojis, don't we now? And we just send each other one-line messages and things. And we've really lost the art of communication through the digital world, I think. So it's been quite nice to actually, meet people and have a chat over a coffee instead of just staring into my phone all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for coming on and having a proper conversation with us.
Pleasure, privilege always.
It's been well overdue. Good luck with the remaining challenges, and as soon as you've got your next challenge, let us know, because we'll follow you and give you all our support.
You're a legend. Thanks. Keep up the awesome work, mate. It's really proud to call you a friend. It's really inspiring what you do as well. And I'll always remember, when you ran into that stadium in Hargeisa in Somaliland as a national legend. When you it was a picture that I'll never forget. So it's incredible. Keep up the awesome work, and I'll catch you soon, buddy.
Definitely. Cheers. Let me know when you're in London, and speak to you soon. Cheers, Jordan. So there you go. No Jody, I'm afraid, because we're moving to Tuesday nights, our records. It's currently Monday night. I've just come back from my honeymoon yesterday, and having had 3 weeks away, I scheduled in Jordan in advance of our switch evening, so Jody couldn't make it. But I think from the conversation how I feel about that chat. Jordan's a lovely guy. He's raised loads of money, and he's been really good at picking challenges, as he says, that are tough but achievable. So I hope you've enjoyed this one. If you have any suggestions of guests for us to contact in the future, then message me directly, david@badboyrunning.com. I'm currently swamped in emails, as you'd imagine, due to being away for so long, but I need to suddenly schedule in all of our future guests, because we currently have a bit of a drought because I haven't been doing any work for quite a few weeks. Please do rate and review. And if you want to ask questions to future guests, we didn't do any for Jordan today because I didn't have time to email him to ask his picture, to put together the profile, to put on Instagram. But follow us on Instagram, and you can then ask questions directly to the guests that we then put to them on the podcast. Probably should be saying a lot of other stuff. Join the Facebook group, blah, 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 blah. Buy the merch, come and join the running club, all those things. But thanks for listening, guys, and we'll be back next week. Until then, have a giddy. Bye, 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 bye. And I'm probably going to say something about YouTube. I don't know. What's the most dangerous thing you can think of for Jordan to do next? Put your comment in. I don't even know if I'm going to do it then with the right timing. Who knows? If this is even going out, I've got no idea, Nick. Is this on the podcast bit? Even though I've already sung the outro? Doesn't make any sense. Do I need to double sing? Bye. But yeah, whatever. Cheers, guys. Cheers, Nick. See you soon.